All right. Welcome to the Apple Voyage podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Rim. This is episode 35 of the podcast. I know it's been a minute since I came out with an episode. I've been busy with a bunch of other things, but I'm coming at you guys with episode 35. And the phenomenal guest I have for me today is the author of a great, phenomenal book series known as the Warminster, if I pronounced that right.
Yes, you did.
If I pronounced that right. He's very well known, got a lot of books, a lot of good series out. So I welcome you guys to check him out. His name is Mr. Joe Hilliard. Nice, good to have you today here today.
It's very nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me. Glad to be on the show.
Thank you. So it's like the podcast is kind of like something simple as we talked about before. But kind of got to, the first question when I announced to people that I'll be having you on as a guest. Quite a lot of my friends, knew, what your book series is because I know you've been doing, writing books for quite some time now and everything. And what kind of it kind of got to my first question. So what kind of inspired you to write, books to begin with? Like what kind of got the motivation going for your book series?
Yeah, so I am a COVID author, and what allowed me the time to write was COVID. My day job was before that primarily. I was a DC lobbyist. I was doing both defense and technology lobbying for many years. And when COVID happened, DC shut down for over a year, and a lot of our stuff went to Zooms, just like this. And
Yeah.
it allowed me the time to work in my den and really knock something off a bucket list, something I've wanted to do for a number of years. And I wrote what I thought was going to be a singular book, which has now turned into a 4-book series, and excited about the path that it's taken. And I mean, based on the success of the novels, I've been able to license the intellectual property of the book for the creation of a video game, and it looks like it's now lurching toward the creation of a graphic novel series, which will be more of a 2024, maybe early 2025 release that'll mirror the storylines and the character arcs and things like that. But based on the popularity of the novels and the story, I've been lucky to be able to find a couple of other mediums in which to kind of promote it. And the video game and the graphic novels are going to follow along the plot lines of the story, which makes it easy for people that have read it to follow along while also seeing it delivered in a different medium.
Okay, that makes sense. And when you mentioned video games and the graphic novels, since you had your book series, I was a video games kind of the was a video game kind of the idea to come out like at the time, and same with the graphic novel as well. Because I know
No,
sometimes I'm
oh,
sorry,
I'm
go
sorry. Go
ahead.
ahead. All I was going to say is that the video game was never in the cards for me. It was something that happened serendipitously. There was a gentleman who read the books who owns a augmented reality and virtual reality gaming company, and he approached me about adapting the novels over because he liked the story, and he thought it would make a good video game. And if you read my novels, they're both epic fantasy and dark fantasy kind of crammed together, and as a
Hmm.
result, you get a lot of rich descriptions that are very Tolkien-esque or George Martin-esque. And so the stuff that people really are excited about that they find in The Hobbit or in Lord of the Rings, or if they're
Hmm.
gamers like Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of that stuff fits really well into video games. And so the adaptation of it, I think, flows pretty well. And if you're, a single person shooter kind of fan or an RPG role playing game kind of fan, um, or RPG video game fan, I should say, it's a
Hmm.
really nice fit to what they're doing, and it's a new technology. And so the AR game will come out in 2024, and the VR game will be available to everybody in 2025. So a few years away from that, but AR is not that far away. It's almost a little over a year. We're almost there.
Okay, that's pretty good. So it's more of an AR and a VR type of thing. That's pretty good. Because from reading about the series, because I'm kind of a new rookie when it comes to the series, and reading book one, it kind of got a little Lord of the Rings esque from it because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and just kind of reading, I'd be like, okay, I could just see this pronounced into a video game aspect, and it kind of got me excited as a writer reading it. I'm almost finished, so once I'm done with that, I'll be on my way to book two, and then book three when that comes out next week. But
Yeah, no, I'm glad you liked it because or are liking it, I should say. I mean, it's exactly. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Lord of the Rings and Tolkien are kind of the granddaddy of them all. If it was not for
yeah.
them, there wouldn't be a fantasy genre. And so, folks like me and those that have come before me have all followed in Tolkien's footsteps in one form or another. And mine's a little different. Obviously, it has a different realm, different characters, different creatures, different magic systems, different monetary systems, but all that stuff helps when you're world building as an author. And I think it also helps for some level of brand fidelity, like where I can't write in Middle Earth or Westeros or Shannara, right? I have to write in the realm of Warminster because that's my realm. So you don't mind creating all these things, and I hope it makes for a really kind of rich read for
Hmm.
folks as they're reading it and they can immerse themselves in a world that has a history. It's got family trees you can look at. It has maps that'll help you figure out where things are. That when I'm describing them now, you can go and take a look at that, and even flowcharts to some of the organizations that are prominent in the novels and coats of arms and things like that I have on my website for the different
Hmm.
houses. And I think that is it has been a lot of fun, almost as side projects, right? So it's
Yeah.
all been good.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And when it came to, because I know when we talk about the Lord of the Rings and everything, as that type of, because for me as an author, I would always read a bunch of different things to kind of, help out. I wouldn't say influence, but kind of get a grand type of thing of what I want to write. Like, let's say mythologies, like Greek mythology, and anything else. Was there any type of thing besides Lord of the Rings that you've read as well that kind of help out with the story writing?
Yeah, sure. So you hit the nail on the head, right? So
Hmm.
much of what I've developed comes from traditional fantasy uh, story writing, and
Yeah.
there's humans and there's elves, but I've tried to create my own creatures out of it, and much of that comes from research on Norse mythology, Native American mythology, some
Hmm.
African mythology, even some Asian mythology. That you
Hmm.
look around and you find some interesting creatures, interesting legends that people haven't been overexposed to, which makes them unique. And what I've done is place them in my novels and put a little different spin on them so that they fit in there well. So it's not directly related to traditional history or some sort of like Celtic mythos or stuff like that, but it's enough that it's grounded in something that might be familiar to them in the back of their heads. And then when they see it, it's easier for them to accept and say, "Oh, I get where this is going because this, I know that somewhere this exists, and it's cool that he's using it to build out his own world." So part of it is that. Part of it is, I'm a longtime geek, right? Like I'm a nerd. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for over 20 years, and so the battles, some of the villains, some of the characters, the heroes have come from role playing and campaign setting as a dungeon master or a player, and I'm able to use some really cool stuff because it's been battle tested, right? It's been
Hmm.
in front of players, or I've played it myself and enjoyed it, and obviously it doesn't fit directly in, but you could shoehorn it in, you could twist it and turn it to make it fit because the story was one that everybody enjoyed playing through. And so I think it's, a bit of that research meets a bit of like real live, RPG play coupled with a creative imagination and some stuff that's been rolling around in my head since I was like 5.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Again, that kind of explains like the little artistic design that you had, for the story from playing, Dungeons and Dragons. Because I didn't play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. I was more of a Skyrim type of guy, like
Mm-hmm.
Skyrim, Diablo, like those type of games that can kind of help me when it came to just writing in general. So that makes a lot of sense with the Dungeons and Dragons because playing Dungeons and Dragons before when I was a kid, it took me a long while to understand the concept, and I was like, oh, okay. And then it took me just to watch the movie to understand how the concept of the whole game goes. I was like, it took me this long to, to understand
Yeah.
the concept, but it's a pretty good concept like as a writer in general, and I can understand where you're coming from with Dungeons and Dragons. Now, as a storybook writer, was there it's never easy writing, writing a story, especially a book series, especially a long book series like you've been writing. Like, were there any sort of challenge as a writer when writing the stories as well? Because it's always going to be a challenge. Like, I feel like it's never easy.
Right. Well, the editing part is the worst part about it, right? Like you think you
Mm-hmm.
have a story done and then you share it with your beta readers or you share it with your publisher or you share it with
Mm-hmm.
your editors and it comes back chopped up. And
Mm-hmm.
that's frustrating. Um, Oftentimes it creates opportunities. You have to rewrite portions of the novel to make it better. But, it's
Mm-hmm.
a team effort. And if you're open to constructive criticism and you recognize that the effort that you went through the editing process is only making the story better, which will make it easier to sell and or for folks to they'll identify it with it better. Then
Mm-hmm.
you kind of accept that and you move on. You're like, all right, this is part of the process, and we got to get through it because editing takes just about as much time as it does writing the book. You write
Yeah.
this book, you get it out, you send it to an editor, it comes back, you send it back to the editor, it comes back again, you send it back a
Mm-hmm.
third time, you finally goes on to your publisher, and then she waves a finger in your face and sends it back to you, and or your beta reader says they don't understand something, and you have to rewrite things, and that part of the process is challenging. There's also points where writer's block sets in for everybody. I avoid
Yeah.
writer's block in a number of ways because I do ample amounts of planning. I mean, I talked a little bit earlier about how I do research, on my stuff, and I think that part of that is I've always written my novels in a way where I know the plots in full before I start to write. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
writers don't do that. They sit down and just start writing, and concepts come to them, and then when they can't figure out the next thing, they get stuck. Well, I've already been stuck. I've fought through it, and now I've got my plan in place, and so it's easy for me to write through it regimentedly, to the point where I get it done, and I usually get it done on or near done on time. And that's just part of my process. And every writer is different, but you run into those challenges too. And frankly, the biggest challenge is selling your books. There's a sea of it out there, whether you're traditionally published like I am. Um, you're swimming upstream against the big boys. Like my publisher is not a big four, big five company, or else I wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
a problem marketing. I have a small niche publisher named Dragon Moon Press, and just
Mm-hmm.
by the name Dragon Moon Press, you know what she publishes. It's
Yeah.
sci-fi, it's fantasy, it's dystopian, but she's small, right? And so for us, we've got to make noise together, and I do that by going to book fairs and book signings and conventions and libraries and book clubs and do that. And I use all the tools at my disposal, like social media, to push stuff out through. I've got, I think, 6 total social media channels right now, and I'm sure the list is going to continue to grow. But whether it's like free on Twitter or Insta or TikTok or wherever people are going to see it, and you build those communities there, and that helps you, sell books as well. But it's got to start with a core story. It's got to be something people want to read and can identify with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always see it as a type of thing. Like, for me, I was thinking like, small publishing companies work out the best pretty much because, like you said, you got to make noise together some way or another. And as a writer myself, like what you just mentioned, I kind of had everything set in stone. For me, I kind of had everything stone since I was a kid. So I was like, okay, I can update this story over the years, and obviously things and everything get in the way and stuff. It happens, but and the kind of process I'm going through now, I'll be like, okay, I finish this specific, let's say, arc or something, then I can work on a different one and kind of can do a continuation on that. So that kind of, you know, um, makes sense. So as an author, what kind of what authors have that you've read before, whether it was a kid or you was a teenager or an adult, have you met that kind of like gave you influence for type of story writing, whatever sci-fi or serious or biography, just influence in general.
Yeah, I would have to say it's some of the traditional. Some of them I've already mentioned. I mean, Tolkien. That's really what got me into fantasy in the first place. I was in 5th grade, and my
Hmm.
my 5th grade teacher read us The Hobbit, and I just fell in love with the story. I
Yeah.
didn't know what fantasy was before that, and all of a sudden it was like, wow, like I'm into it. So Tolkien for starters, but the more contemporary folks, I would say R.A. Salvatore, who writes the Dark Elf trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
And then some. I think there's a total of 30 books in that series now. I would say the Dragonlance Chronicles from Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman,
Mm-hmm.
Sword of Shannara with Terry Brooks. I like Robert Jordan a lot. Obviously, I was a big fan of Brandon Sanderson's stuff. So I look at them and I say I can base myself. I would say those are influences in the fantasy side, but I also write this dark fantasy, and so I have a tendency to institutionalize. Well, that's not the right word. To institute um, like some of the gothic in there. So like
Mm-hmm.
my reading, like every Halloween, I reread Bram Stoker's Dracula. The Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Anything I can get my hands on that has that sort of either medieval kind of gothic to it, or even sort of a Victorian feel to it, like a Jack the Ripper or a what's the word, like a spring heel Jack kind of story. Those are the kind of things that really scared me as a kid, and I think putting them inside the story of fantasy really kind of gives you some villains and or monsters that I would be scared of, and I hope my readers are scared of as well.
I mean, now that you bring up like Frankenstein and everything else, I was mostly scared of the Addams family growing up when I was a kid. So so that kind of makes sense. Like you kind of gain influence from things that you're scared of and everything, and then from as a horror movie, generic myself, I like Friday the 13th, the nightmares of Freddy Krueger and all of them, like kind of gained influence with that. It kind of patronized me as an author because like for me, I was such big fans of these movies when I was a kid. I kind of include them from like little excerpts and everything, but I kind of just like make like a funny excerpt because I'm not scared of a silent dude that John and Misty Lake just going to kill everybody with machetes and stuff. Like you you can't be scared of that type of thing anymore unless he's coming for you. So it's like those type of things that kind of help out, not with just like with writing horror in general, but if you're writing something, let's say about him, kind of brings out, for me, it kind of brings out the more funny than the horror, honestly. But it does help out, like as a writer, if you're trying to go that specific route and just to, make a horror story, whether it's violent. I mean, all horror stories are violent to me. I don't think there's any, kid friendly horror stories about anything. It probably is, but I would say it helps out as a writer just to you know, look at, different movies, read different stories, and just kind of look and be like, okay, I can do that, but not really 10 times better, but gain influence and kind of write a good story from these type of influences. So you're not wrong on that. And I would say when it comes to, just, writing in general, so was the goal growing up when you was a kid to always be a writer, an author, or it was like just something completely different, or like let's say reading, like I said before, reading something or watching some kind of pitch that dream into your head, be like, okay, I want to become a writer. Like, what was that kind of the influence with you, pretty much?
Well, I had several influences. The first was I've always enjoyed writing, and I knew that I would do it one day. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
start out my career doing it, but what really started me down the path was my uncle was a Marine who was paralyzed in combat, and I grew up in his bedroom. He was like a second father to me. My mother was
Mm-hmm.
his nurse, and that was his sister.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had a limited form of things he could do as a quadriplegic, and one of the things he could do was write. He had an old-fashioned typewriter that eventually became a computer. And he was able to type away on this with a device that they fashioned for his hands. And he typed and he wrote horror stories and pulp fiction that would get submitted back in the day to magazines and things like that. Very short story stuff. But I fell in love with what he was doing because I emulated him. I wanted to be like him, and so of course I wanted to write something. And then life gets in the way, And I
Mm-hmm.
started to. I went to college. I got my job. I went to DC. Was doing that, and now then when the opportunity kind of represented itself, when COVID happened, I was I was able to finally sit down and do something, and I put something together, and I shared it with an associate professor friend of mine who thought that it was publishable, and she referred me to an editor who referred me to a publisher, and here we are today. So things are cruise. So I've always wanted to do it. I didn't
Hmm.
expect it to happen in this fashion, but hey, like I said, sometimes life just takes over and destiny finds you instead of the other way around.
Yeah. And back to the video game spectrum. So I was thinking, so the video game, is it kind of like, since you mentioned AR and VR, is it the VR going to be kind of like a horror game, kind of like, Outlast, or it's just going to be a regular kind of game like the Hobbits, Diablo, and Skyrim type games?
It's going to be Skyrim Diablo-ish. The AR portion will be able to reward players in real life too. So, like if you go in and slay the dragon and you recover their treasure, your character will level up because at the heart it's an RPG game, right? So, like your
Mhm.
character levels up. You're going to create your avatar. You pick your skill sets, and as you get better, your skills get better. Your magic increases, your power increases, and that's fine. But then the AR portion of it is stuff that you'll be able to find a QR code in the dragon's treasure that'll give you like a buy one get one at a Subway or a free coffee at Starbucks, and so you can literally it can be influenced by sponsors in the same way you're seeing that in a lot of video games these days where they're sponsoring stuff like Madden or NHL 2023, and the sponsors are those that have the equipment, and the players that are playing it are going to go out and buy the equipment from those sponsors, and the same thing will happen here. But the technology for the AR game is primarily coming from the partner firm, which is it's called Niantic, and Niantic
Mhm.
owns Pokemon Go. So,
Oh wow.
Pokemon Go and AR technology have been around forever. And so if you've ever played Pokemon, instead of being out there trying to capture Pokemon, you'll be out there doing things in the real world where you could be playing at somebody's restaurant, and the video game will encourage you to go to their bar or restaurant or their clothing store or wherever they want you to go as part of it. And it'll only be a small portion of the overall game. You'll be able to play the game on your computer, play it on your system. And then when it gets to VR, it's a different story. That's an entirely different headset. You could play it pretty much anywhere, but that's still about 2 years away. That's the end of 2025.
Okay.
And the game, I think the headset technology has been getting better and better. And I think when we see Apple's product hit the shelves here in a couple of months, that really is a game changer in the sense that you're walking around with a computer on your head, and you also have these glasses that don't look clunky. That you're not going to walk into things when you're out in the public. You'll be able to wear them, play them. Frankly, you'll be able to see your own emails and stuff, and kind of do like an Iron Man, kind of where you're grabbing stuff that only you see and throw it around. And that's what's going to happen with the AR stuff. When we get there, we're going to be there. We're not coming back, right? Like that's just the next step in that evolution of the technology. And our game is part of that. So you'll be able to play the game wearing your goggles eventually, but for now, it's going to be phone, it'll be computer, it'll be system, and then eventually headset.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Ooh, I might have to get a VR set then.
You got a couple
So,
of years to save up, man. So don't worry about it.
oh man, okay, so I got to get a VR then. So, is the video game aspect, because we was talking about horror earlier, is like some of those aspects going to be in the game? Because I don't want to play VR and the next thing I know, like something just pops out. It's like, oh shoot, like,
Yeah.
oh
No,
man.
well, it's really going to follow the lion's share of the story is a fantasy story that just has some evil monsters in it, right? So I have the
Mhm.
antlered man, which is kind of this creature that I stole out of Norse mythology, where you this 10 foot tall guy who has the body of a human, the
In the
hooves of a
face of a,
goat, and
okay,
and
yeah.
and this big like skeletal head with these antlers, like almost like a moose. And we also have like a skin stealer, which is kind of like a doppelganger, and these creatures attack you and they get into you and they eat you from the inside out and become you, stuff like that. So you'll see these things, and it's not necessarily like you're fighting orcs in Lord of the Rings or in Diablo. You there's or whatever, it doesn't matter, like stormtroopers first, that kind of stuff. You're going to have those types of enemies, but you're also going to have these really kind of evil monster enemies that are part of it too. That make it a little darker than traditional like high fantasy would be. This is more dark fantasy, than it is high fantasy.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I I was gonna think I was like, okay, dark fantasy means a lot of dangerous, violent creatures from. I've read a lot of dark fantasy, and I was just like, oh man. And I kind of influenced, like you said, like, kind of influenced like one of those characters into your story, and I kind of took a lot of influence from well, I forget what it's called, Japanese folklores or whatever. Like
Mhm.
if you read like Japanese urban legends, like the Teke Teke or a bunch of other stuff as well. I kind of took some of those and made those into enemies and stuff. And it's been a challenge so far, but it's just like if I'm going to include something, I got to include something with a story behind it, you know? Because like I can't just include some randomly trying to, let's say, kill one of our characters if it don't have a, let's say, a justifiable reason for that. That to me kind of lacklusters a story a little bit, because I introduce a villain and for some random reason, like yeah, you got secret bosses and stuff like that too, but I need to include a story behind all these stories, these characters, and for me that kind of helps out with it could be video game wise or story wise or movie wise or whichever or anything. And in regards to, the book series, so after this one is done, is it plans for continuation or or a different story set in the same universe as your current chose you now.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. So I've got at the end of book 4, which will come out right before the holidays this year, series
Hmm.
1 of the Warminster saga will come to an end. And then in the interim, before the next series starts, I'm going to launch a couple of smaller novellas about some of the more popular characters, giving you
Hmm.
insight to their origin stories. And that way, I get a lot of feedback at conventions and book signings about characters that people like and characters that they don't, or characters that they love to hate, kind of stuff as part of that. And so they asked me for backstories, and I think those are easier to write. I can get them out more quickly, and then they're also set in the same setting. But I've also launched a Kindle Vella episodic. I think I'm today. I submitted the next one, and it's episode 25, and it's more of a young adult coming of age story about a
Hmm.
girl who is rescued by a fisherman she was poisoned, but they find out that she's actually a siren, and this parson from the town saves her life by getting her out of there because the fishermen want to kill her. I mean, they don't like sirens, they don't like mermaids, and things, and
Hmm.
so they're after her, and he sneaks her away, and it's how she finds out who she really is as part of that. But that's an entirely different story set within the same world. So you're seeing a different part of the world where she's coming from, while the greater story with the series is unfolding in series 1, and that will be series 2. And then, but you see the same gods and you see the same currency, and you get a feel for it because you can look at the same map and say, oh, I get where this series is happening because it's in the same place where I want to go and read more about. So
Hmm. Okay, yeah, that makes sense because it'll make sense like short side stories about popular characters to explain more about them and their adventures in between the universe makes more sense. Because when you mentioned Mermaid, that kind of brought up a short story I did about one of my characters, but the difference from him is like the moment instead of like the mermaids protecting their own kind, they're trying to use the mermaid's power because she has a fence power that the king wants, and the character is just like, okay, what did I get myself into?
yeah.
Like he was just walking along the beach, and then he seen her because he was walking along the beach after he defeated Loki, because because like I include a lot of Greek mythology in it. So now he defeated Loki, he's walking along the beach with his closed battle damage and all that. Then he sees a mermaid who was just on the beach trying to breathe, and then he goes to her and be like, okay, are you good? Like, are you everything? The moment he was trying to talk to her, the spirit comes to us, like literally goes past his face, and he's like, okay, where did that come from? The moment somebody drew this, which I sent to you. The
That's
moment
cool.
he looks, it was a whole bunch of mermaids like literally lining up in the army, and um in the back, all the way in the back, you can see the shadow of Cthulhu in the background. So the thing about that is just from reading stuff about Cthulhu and stuff like that. From what I've read different ones because obviously there's different ones out there. But the one I've read is like, okay, if Cthulhu can read in your mind that you're not trying to bother him, and you sense that you're gonna do damage to somebody else, he will see you as an ally. And I was like, okay, that's kind of a weird interpretation, but okay. So the character, he's not worried about the mermaids because obviously you got a deity in the background right there that could pretty much wreak havoc if you just woke him up. Because obviously the thing that the mermaids have can pretty much wake any type of legendary sea, figure out what is the Kraken, Cthulhu, the Leviathan. And I'm just thinking, yeah, because it was a pretty funny moment when I was writing. I was like, um, he was waiting to Cthulhu, like, I need you to go. Like, I'm dealing with a mermaid threat. And then he stared at him for like 15 minutes and obviously like, and just went down to sea. And then he's like, okay, let me. And then when another spirit went out, I was like, okay, time for me to get out of here. He took the mermaid to, his headquarters and all that, put her in water. And then he was just trying to figure out what was going on because the character can breathe underwater. He's just trying to figure out why, it's a bunch of mermaids like after him. And then the character, it doesn't take him that long to figure out what's going on because, okay, from talking with her, they after her immense power, and also he became public enemy number one for no reason at all. Because if he became public enemy number one for no reason, okay, fine. It's just like if you play God of War, it's kind of like that. So it's kind of like that. And that kind of brings us to you know, my other question. So
Sure.
since you said you kind of bring like characters from different mythologies and stories that you read before, what was kind of like the most, I'm not gonna say the funniest, but like what was kind of the most influential character that you read in anything that you kind of put in your stories in general, or kind of base the character on? 'Cause I think
Yeah.
influencing, I think just like bringing in characters or kind of basing the characters all kind of helps out as a story writer for me.
Yeah, the funniest is it, and this is going to be out of the blue, was my old dog. I cast him as a war dog
Mhm.
in this because he was crazy. Like I had this yellow lab who was the
Mhm.
one of the biggest yellow labs. I mean, the thing was up to, I'm 6'2" and he was up to my hip. He was
Oh
very
wow.
tall for his size, and just nuts, right? And my friends would like, instead of the Baldog or Balrog from Lord of the Rings, they were calling him the Baldog, and making fun out of him. He was a Terminator. Like he got hit by a car twice. Both times he
Mm.
did damage to the car, and both times he had did no damage to himself. Like literally, I was paying for the guy's deductible because my dog hit his car. Like the thing was indestructible. He got cancer. We had to put him down when he was 14. But the dog was just funny, and the stories that I have, it's sort of like Marley and Me, except he's a Terminator, right?
Yeah.
And so I cast him as a war dog, and his master rides him, and it's sort of like a halfling on steroids. He's kind of like a
Mhm.
hobbit, except he's a barbarian hobbit, and he's called Blue Connie, and he has face paint on which is blue. He looks like a blue raccoon, and he rides into battle with these serrated daggers on top of the war dog, and of course the war dog goes and attacks. And as stupid as that is, that's when I'm like, I get more compliments on him as comic relief, him and his dog as comic relief, than I do on most of the characters, because when you read him, he's so ridiculous, but he's such a cool character, and he rides in at the last moment, saves the day a couple of times because he's just crazy. He'll attack anything, right? And my dog was part of that. So like for me, it was a way for me to memorialize my cool dog,
Mhm.
and make him part of the realm, even though I've gathered influence, like you asked, an inspiration from other kind of mythologies and books I've read and stuff like that, and you kind of have to make it your own. In this case, that was my own. That was my damn dog, and I put him in there, and everybody loves him. Didn't even know it was my dog. They just thought I was making up a crazy character, so it's all good.
And when you mention it, I just kind of think I just thought of something like it's just like after a victorious battle, they're at the bar just celebrating and stuff like that, and the character is just chugging a bunch of beers. Be like, I like the little hell things. I forgot it was that one scene in Lord of the Rings when that happened. They were saying hell something. I just thought of that when you was explaining that.
Yep. And he feeds
Because
Blue Connie feeds the dog beer. And the beer, the dog farts and the dog just goes crazy. It's just it's a fun comic reliefy, it breaks the tension kind of character because you can count on him to do the craziest thing. And and then he berserks out, like he's a berserker hobbit, that's basically roided out, like totally buff
yeah,
and
he's
can jump
buff.
20 feet and it fights on the back of a war dog as his mount. And it's a lot of fun to write the character. So in the last couple of books, there's been more Blue Connie than there was supposed to be, but it's because he's popular. People like him.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the characters like that just kind of makes the story entertaining because I kind of when I was writing my other characters that I story that I've been had a story on, but I never had design on them recently because I kind of based the design on myself a little bit. So he he doesn't know how strong his power is, but everybody else knows how strong his power is. So he's like it, because I think if I remember correctly, I read in a gung ho character like how you read yours, and every time he's like very eccentric, he's very what's that word, barbaric. He's very focused. Be like, who do I got to kill next? And my character looking like. And then it was one time when I was writing, and that was my first time writing the war scene. So it was this legendary and forbidden sword that his parents left him. He didn't know how to use it, and then he was like, "Okay, you see a bunch of enemies coming towards us." So the barbaric character was like, he's like doing this to the back of his head, be like, and he's looking at him like, in the moment he figured out how to use the sword, he cleared out 15,000 troops in only one swipe. And he's looking like, and then he got his glasses on, right? He's like, oh,
So that's good comic relief, man.
yes, because like the only because like the only strong enemy is of course the general, but everybody else is like, oh. And then like when that happened, everybody else was like, oh, there's no point in being here then. And everybody else be like, yeah, I get to go home to my wife and everything. And my character was like, oh, okay. I didn't know half of you was married anyway, but cool. But it's just like those funny moments and everything. But because like obviously I got two strong characters, but I'm a firm believer that the strong characters gotta get their butts whipped every once in a while. Like I'm a firm believer of that, and I kind of because like the where I'm at in my story right now is in like a setting in the Greek mythology world with Medusa, right? With Medusa, when I was reading Greek mythology, I know Poseidon and Athena was the one that put that spell on her from their affair. So he fought her because he has the two characters got these marks on their faces. One of them is called the hex marking of damnation, and the other one is called the hex marking of merciless. So the damnation one is just basically, overwhelming power, but you have a ruthless, forbidden background. Like at first the hooded character, he couldn't control it, but now he can use that power to his whim. And the merciless is just basically use the power, you become damn right ruthless. That's how bad it is. So with that, he noticed that he was told by other people, okay, he was told reports that Medusa was in town. First thing he thinks of is like, oh shoot. And because he knows when you look at her, you turn to stone, right? And then like the moment he finds her, she just looks at him and he's like, oh, it was a pretty funny moment, right? He's like,
Yeah,
oh,
nothing happened.
I'm not turning to stone. And she's trying the utmost of her power, and then he's looking at her and was like, it's kind of cute. You trying to turn me to stone. She was like trying to figure out what's going on. Fight breaks out and everything, and then obviously he has this power where he can look at her memories. It's kind of a violent type of power, but he has to literally squeeze into the person's head just to figure out how they work. And I'd be like, okay, I got to kill Poseidon and Athena just to get her back to normal again. But he didn't know that his brother already killed Poseidon, but he had to take care of Athena, and Athena's been after him for a minute since he's been awake. And like I said, everybody's after him for no reason because of something that his father did. I'd be like, but why you got to put it on the son? I didn't do anything. The father
Sons
is
inherit the
dead.
sins of the father, right? Yeah,
Exactly. Like the father is dead. Well, not really, but currently he thinks that the father is dead. Every person that everybody set him after, he's pretty much killed. And I'm just like, look, you're gonna keep doing this, but you know who's the actual threat. It's not me. So, and that kind of brings up like another question. It was like, um, you ever written like, because I've written extra stories about the villains too. You ever like written side stories about the villains, like explaining like I wouldn't say I would say their actions because like the villains that I've written, they had pretty justifiable reasons why they became what they became. Like, have you ever written short stories like that before?
So that's one of the origin stories I'll be writing about Great Taurus the Mad. I mean, people want to know why he is where he is because you're right. I mean, they're not born evil. Something happens to them and they make a choice that takes them down the wrong path. And
Mm-hmm.
as a writer and even as a reader, I want to know that that person, like everybody to some degree, deserves a second chance. And in his case, does he take that second chance? Is there a path to redemption for him, or does he just continue to be what he's become? As part of that, and you don't know what got him here at this point. You learn more in books 2 and 3, and by the end of book 4 you know what happened, but to
Mm-hmm.
see it through his eyes in one of these short stories is something that's coming in 2024, so that part's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, and for those that watch this episode, because if I'm not mistaken correctly, they can pre-order book 3 right on Amazon and everywhere else too. And
Yep,
book
you could
4,
find.
I don't. Oh, sorry, continue.
Yeah, I was going to say, book 3 is available pretty much anywhere you look for books. So if you want the audio copy, you can get it from Audible or iTunes or Apple Books or wherever, like Kobo. If you are an e-reader, Barnes and Noble, you can download it onto your Nook. Amazon, you can download it onto your Kindle. You can get a hard copy from Amazon. You can go to my publisher's website at dragonmoonpress.com and just get it everywhere. It's available pretty ubiquitously. You'll be able to find it wherever you look for JV Hilliard.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna get your get my stuff signed because when you said DC, I was like, wait, so I was like, wait, you work in DC too? Because that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm down there about
I
3 days
was
a
like,
week.
wow. Okay, I
Yep.
was like, wow, okay. So I gotta get mine signed by you eventually. But book 4,
I'll take care of you, man. Don't worry.
appreciate it. So book 4 is currently in the process, just for anybody who's wondering and everything. And that's the last one of the part 1 series, right?
Right. That'll be the final book of series 1. Right.
Okay. And and as an author, well, not published yet, but as in like a writer, I usually have like a set time of how many books I'm going to write. Is that something like since you got 3 books, like one's coming out next week, and you got 3 books. Like, is there a set like of how many books you want to write, like in your lifetime in general?
No, I've never really set a goal. I if I set a goal, it's around certain aspects of it. So like I wanted to finish the series, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and that's now within reach. That'll happen before the end of the year. And then
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, I want to do another series, and I also want to explore these origin stories and things like that too, and see what people like and don't like. And I've got another idea for a separate story set within the same realm too. So there's lots of stuff, but to say I want to get to 10 books and I'm done, I don't want to put that kind of limitation on myself. I want to see if
Yeah.
is 4 good enough and I'm done, or is it, do I want to do this for the back 9 of my career and just focus on writing and do that. And if that's the case, then I'll be writing more than I'm writing now. And I'm enjoying it. So I can see myself doing that. I mean, if I can retire doing this stuff, it would be a lot of fun. And I've got to build a readership, and with the other stuff like the graphic novels and the video games, it should allow me to be able to finally get into that lane and just run in that lane. So we'll see. But I haven't set any limitations on myself yet because I'm still a relatively young guy. I've got time,
Yeah.
and we'll see where this goes. I do want to veer away from fantasy and do one vampire novel that I've got a great
Oh
idea for.
yes.
But
Hmm.
that's a little out of genre, and I don't know where that fits just yet. And but I've got a really cool, super cool idea for it that I hope that people like. But that I can see like 5 years from now, right? It's sort of like Hail Mary pass. You know me as a fantasy writer, but here's my horror story. Read this, and that's I don't know how to do that, so we'll figure that out when I get there.
That's funny you mentioned. That's funny you mentioned that because like with a vampire thing, it's for me it's really not that hard of a thing to kind of influence in the current world of a story. Honestly, it's just the only problem with it is like for me like how Blade is written, the Marvel character.
Hmm.
How the Blade, I forgot his name, but I was literally talking to him the other day that did the Blade comics. How he written his stories was pretty much perfect of how vampire thing is written. And if you saw the Blade movies, that's pretty much like how perfect it is because like how Blade movies is, you got gods coming out the blue being intertwined in this. So it could, in all honesty, it could be any way how how certain world of story in is written, or it could be set in a different part of the world in the same universe. But for me, I had to like set it in the same type of thing. But with me, but the current character, the new character I'm writing, kind of had a vendetta with not with Dracula because Dracula's already dead in my universe, but it was like another vampire mythology. I forgot his name. I've sent it to you, but he's kind of like one of the most ruthless vampire entities of all time. So it was like okay, because not even the strongest not even the strongest gods can defeat this man. That's how bad it is. So I'm like, oh man, how am I going to fin-? Like at the time, I was like, how am I going to finish this? And then from writing it, and I realized, okay, you can't just defeat him by yourself. Like, you gotta have a bunch of people with you. But like, right, it's kind of a challenge so far, but it's getting there. It's not really an ending for me yet, but it's getting there. Because like, I think writing that type of style is easy for me, and I think it'll be easy for you as well since you already got the fantasy notion going down. Because vampires are part of fantasy too, and I think you do a pretty good job at that from from what I'm reading so far and everything, and just reading the book in general, and it kind of brings me up to another question, like video games and stuff like that. Um, as a script writer, has there ever it been many thoughts of like, okay, I see this becoming like, let's say, a show or movie someday? Because like
Oh,
from
that's a great question. I would love to see it. I think it's really something that lends itself to that medium pretty well. I mean, epic fantasy just does that, right? You get big battles and then you get little duels in the big battles and you get
Mhm.
magic and you get these, the harrowing adventures and stuff like that. And I think that from that perspective, it lends itself well to both the silver screen and the small screen, right? So whether it's a movie or a series
Mhm.
of movies, or whether it's a Netflix or an Amazon or something like that, Hulu, I think that there's clearly an adaptation out there for it because there's a fan base for it. I mean, every time those shows come, even in the last year or so, you've seen,
A
the return
lot.
of Game of Thrones and House of Dragons. You've seen the return of Lord of the Rings with the stuff that Amazon had done with Galadriel, and then you most recently saw Willow. There's
Yeah.
a Lucas thing that was from the '80s that really hadn't been touched in almost 40 years, and they
Mhm.
brought it back and reintroduced it, and people just flocked to watch it, right? And so I think that there's clearly a rabid fan base that's aching for more of that kind of content. And I would be honored if someone would consider my novels worthy of that. Even like you saw Wheel of Time just last year, or The
Yeah.
Sandman. That's close enough, with Neil's work. I mean, I think that you see them pop up all the time. I know they're expensive to make, so they don't usually just throw those opportunities around. You've got to have a decent following and sold millions of books and stuff. They want to make sure it's safe play for them. But in many instances, I think that would be the ultimate humility for someone to be able to come to me and say, hey, would you be willing to license your intellectual property to make a movie or a series? And I would be humbled by that.
Look, I'm gonna say this right now, as a writer myself, reading the book so far. Like, I got a gut feeling that this is gonna become a show or a movie. Like, I got a really good gut feeling about it. So I'm hoping in the future it
I
becomes a
hope
show.
you're
Like,
right, man.
I got a really good. Like, it's just from reading the book so far. It's like it's very entertaining to read for me. And it's just like, cause like the funny thing when I was reading it, right? Because when we talked before in email, I was like, oh, okay, reading the book and everything. I'm literally looking up on Netflix. I was like, okay, this gotta be a series. This is one funny moment when I'm so tired, right? I'm like, okay, this gotta be a movie series or something. It wasn't, but I was disappointed. It wasn't yet, but
It might be one day. Might be one day.
no, it will be. But like, I really got good hopes for. I really got good hopes for this book series. Come like, because it's reading the series. Because like, I haven't been for reading. Like, I don't mind reading a bunch of series and be entertained. But like, when it comes to being really, really, really entertained, is really getting that to me with this series. So I'm saying it now. Like, it is going to be coming. Oh, I'm hopefully coming soon. Cause like
Both
I
fingers crossed.
exactly like it's just from reading like I forget which chapter I'm at, but like from reading it, it's just like, okay, I need this to become like a series. Like, I don't care if it becomes before my stuff becomes a series. Like, I don't care. It's like, okay, once this stuff come out, I can gain influence from them and do like little Easter eggs and stuff and tribute to the series. Like, I got a good gut feeling this is gonna become like a good series of movies. If it become a movie, I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna send you and be like, yeah, I got an early screening for it, so I'm gonna check it out real quick. I'm gonna let you know how it goes. The moment I check it out, I'll be like, you put some stuff in there that wasn't in the book, but I'll let that slide for once. But I got a
Hey, that's
good
okay.
gut.
If they make it a movie and they want to change some of it, I'm certain I'll be all right.
Here's the thing. I'm not really a fan of that type of thing because, like, I'm a fan of sticking to the story. You know, that's just me though. But if they if they're gonna do something like that, if it's something that's a little, violent, because my series is pretty violent. So if there's some things that need to change, it's gonna be hard. But I got no choice. So, but I got a good
I
gut
get it.
feeling about this series though. So
Well, I hope you're right, my friend.
like for one pinky finger cross, I got good hopes for this series. So like that kind of brings me to my last question. It's just like, what advice would you give to people that's trying to, go the same career path that you went, that you're still going through right now, that you kind of got at the beginning? Like, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, well, I think there's really three pieces of advice I would give to any aspiring author. The first is, be open to constructive criticism. And in part, what I mean is when you hand your stuff over to readers or an editor or your publisher, uh, not everybody, especially when it's in raw form, that first manuscript, they're going to come back with questions. Be prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
And also
Mm-hmm.
understand that not everybody's going to like your stuff. Some people are going to read
Mm-hmm.
it and give it a 2-star review. And just like, this isn't for me. Others are going to love it. They're going to say, I wish I can give it more than 5 stars. But the truth of the matter is, um, be open to that because your story could only get better and iron sharpens iron, right? And you got to be, it's got to be the best and let it be tested by people before you release it so that they can
Mm-hmm.
see what that is. Point two is I write every day. I try to make it like muscle memory. It's almost like when you forget to go, like I can't go to the gym today, you kind of feel fat, or I skipped. I'm off my diet, and you feel guilty about it. You want to be
Mm-hmm.
that way, and I'm not saying you have to write a chapter or a book in a day. I'm just saying even outlining stuff, editing past chapters, editing future things that are happening, putting things together in a timeline. At least you're thinking about it, and that keeps the momentum going. And then you'll feel bad on days where you skip it. And everybody takes holidays and vacations. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is like make sure that you make it that sort of muscle memory. I think that's part of it. And three is use every tool you have at your disposal to help you sell your stuff. And social media is free.
Yeah.
Your time going to events, book signings, libraries. I don't care if there's 3 people there. Go, book clubs, conventions like I do. You will run into people, and that's how people will get to know you. You'll be on the circuit. They'll feel, what it is that you're doing. They'll see the momentum. They're going to want the next stuff, and all of that's free except for your time. And I realize that time is money, but at the end of the day, unless you're one of you got something at a big 4, big 5 publishing house, you're going to be working on your own as an independent author, or you're going to be working with a small to medium sized mid-market house that might not have the same resources, that can't pay you an advance, or can't afford to send you to places and do things. So you've got to be parsimonious in choosing the right path for yourself, but use every resource you have, like doing podcasts like this. The only thing it's cost me is an hour's worth of my time, and people will watch this because they're going to watch your show. They're going to watch my stuff. We're going to cross promote. And all of a sudden someone on there is going to say, you know what, that guy's pretty interesting. I'm going to go buy his stuff, and that's what you hope for. And so those are the 3 pieces of advice I would impart to any aspiring author.
All right. You heard it from Mr. Hilliard. But yeah, like he said in his advice, it's just, you always gotta, constructive criticism is the big thing that you gotta learn how to handle. Because when I was a kid, constructive criticism annoyed me, but I was like, okay, it's a good learning experience though. So there's nothing wrong with, getting comments from people and just be like, okay, I can do this better my craft and all that. And that goes to the second point, is just like, you gotta have, it's like, just take for granted what you have, pretty much. Like you said, it's just like, not everybody's gonna have that 4 or 5-star publisher off the snap of their finger like that. It's just like you said earlier, small companies, whichever company is willing to promote your work and believes in your story to the amount, the extent, is the good one. And then the third point, you got, always be confident and focused in what you do. And I completely agree with that 100%. Well, that is pretty much all the questions I got for this, man.
Well, hey, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Hey, I appreciate you joining. Like, this is like a pretty informative episode to get to learn about your career, and kind of just have everybody that looks at the episode later on tonight just learn more about you, and fans that you already have your stories, like, look at this conversation and just 2 authors chopping it up and everything. So I appreciate you joining me.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. For everybody that's watching this, this episode will be released around 8 o'clock Eastern time, and stay tuned for episode 36. And